The Silver Ring by Waranavich. On a delightful spring morning, when the gentle breeze spreads the scent of jasmine through the air, and the early birds, on branches wet with dew, play a fresh symphony of life. In a house outside the city, a young doctor wakes to the sudden ringing of his mobile phone. The ringing is sharp and relentless and breaks the morning silence. Drowsy, he rises, but before his hand reaches the mobile phone, its sound stops for a moment. He gazes, bewildered, at the dark screen of the phone, as though someone from afar has called only to wake him from sleep, without having a word to say. The doctor sighs, and with a yawn, turns back and goes toward the bathroom. He opens the faucet, and lukewarm water slides over his shoulders and washes away the night's fatigue, and falls to the floor. After he cleans himself, he gets dressed and goes to the kitchen and takes some things from the refrigerator and cooks a simple meal and sits at the breakfast table. Before him are a cup of bitter coffee, a piece of toasted bread, and a half-boiled egg. Without appetite, he sips the coffee, puts a bite in his mouth, and rises. He puts on a thin, black shirt with tiny floral patterns, wears his white summer trousers and shoes, puts his cream-colored English hat on his head, and leaves the house. As he steps into the lane, the neighbor's daughter, from the half-open window, like an image in a frame, sees him and waves. The doctor, with an artificial smile, lifts his hat and thus gives his reply. For a brief moment, the sparkle of the girl's look settles on his heart, but the sorrow of his lost wife at once extinguishes that light. At the crossroads, a ragged homeless man blocks his way and in a pleading voice asks for money. The doctor reaches into his pocket, takes out a coin, and places it in his hand. The man, with weary eyes, bends and shows his gratitude. The young doctor, without paying attention, continues on his way. Half an hour later, he reaches the Fairground Bazaar, a place where the hubbub and clamor of people make the passage of time lose its color. Upon entering the market, a wall clock, worn and cracked, catches his eye. At once he buys it, and a little farther on his gaze falls on a hand-woven tablecloth with colorful designs, and he asks the seller for that as well. After some wandering, his eyes fall upon an old man at the end of the bazaar, who, in a quiet corner, has spread aged paintings on the ground. The young man fixes his gaze on those paintings, steps forward, and speaks with the old man, and very soon realizes that this elder is essentially different from all the people of the market. His tone is cold, his manner and silence heavy, and in his words no trace of sympathy or compassion is seen. Curiosity flares in the doctor's heart. He asks, "Are these paintings made by your own hand, or have you obtained them from elsewhere?" And he pauses a little, but the old man gives him no clear answer. Only after an irrelevant prelude he says, "If you are a buyer of paintings, I have a unique work, something I have never offered to anyone, And then he takes a threadbare cotton sack from beside him, unties its knot, brings out a colored painting, and hands it to him. When the doctor's eyes fall upon the painting, his breath is trapped in his chest. It is the image of a young, beautiful woman with an astonishing face exactly like that of his lost wife. With a trembling voice, he asks, "Who is this figure? Who painted it?" The old man, indifferent, gathers his wares and says, "I cannot stay here any longer. My family are waiting for me. If you want the painting, pay for it and take it with you." The young doctor pays for the painting and with hesitation asks, "May I see you again? I wish to know the story of this painting and where it has come from." The old man, without giving an answer, only nods his head and disappears into the crowd. The young doctor, after the old man hastily disappears in the crowd of the bazaar, carries the painting along with the other purchases he has made to his home. At home, so that the painting does not fall before his eyes and the memory of his lost wife does not scrape his soul like a dagger, he decides to hide it, and even all at once regrets that he has bought it. He takes the painting and goes to the basement of the house, opens the door of a damp storeroom, and throws the painting onto an old cot, as though he wants to consign the young woman's fixed gaze in the frame to the heart of darkness. Then he returns to his study, sits on a sofa, and so that his mind may calm, turns on his newly bought tablet and reads the day's news. Moments pass. The silence of the house and the nostalgic atmosphere make him heartsick. He rises, changes his clothes, and intending to go out, turns off the lights and leaves the house. On the way, he calls his old friend on his mobile phone and arranges that they go together to their usual Italian restaurant, the same place where they often eat seafood together and a goblet of red wine. He ends the call, and the two of them, after a quarter of an hour, reach the restaurant. The space of the restaurant is filled with the smell of fried shrimp and fresh clams, and with a soft melody that is playing in the air. They order their favorite dishes, and after eating and paying, they leave the place. Outside the restaurant, the doctor's friend eagerly asks him to come with him to a party outside the city. The doctor, who flees loneliness, accepts his suggestion at once. They drive for an hour and a bit along a deserted road until at last they reach a delightful and lively garden. They spend the afternoon and evening among the other guests, and when night comes, his friend drives him back to his house and does not let him drive. The young doctor, slightly tipsy from the wine he has drunk, says goodbye to his friend and goes toward his own house, takes the key from his pocket, and opens the door of the house and enters, and with amazement sees that all the house lights are on, while he had turned them all off when leaving. He looks around. Everything in the house is neat and clean, and a familiar aroma that is the smell of his favorite food has spread in the kitchen air. He hastens toward the kitchen, but no one is there. Only several pots are on the stove, and the smell of prepared food comes out from their half-open lids. At the sight of these scenes, he loses his composure and picks up the phone. and dials the number of the woman who now and then visits his house for cleaning and attending to some tasks. A calm voice from the other end says, "Good evening, doctor. What has happened that you are calling at this hour of the night?" He asks, "Did you come to my house today?" The woman says with surprise, "No. What has happened? Has something occurred?" The doctor, with a short pause, replies, "It is nothing important. I will explain later." And he ends the call. He hastens to the control room, turns on the monitor, and rewinds the recorded film of the cameras. With astonished eyes, he sees a vague shadow, like a specter roaming in the house, moving the objects and working in the kitchen to cook. A cold fear penetrates into his soul. He rubs his eyes and looks again. The image still remains. He who does not believe in spirits and ghosts and supernatural things now faces something that his reason has no power to grasp. He transfers the video onto a memory device, goes to the garage, starts his old car, and immediately drives away from the house. In the darkness of the road, he calls his friend and with a trembling voice says that he is on his way and heading to his house to show him something that he himself still does not know how such a thing can be possible. The young doctor, distraught and anxious, at midnight reaches the house of his old friend. At the threshold, the gentle smile of the host removes a little of his anxiety. They enter the house and sit on the sofas, and after they drink a cup of coffee, both go to the study. They look at the entrance and the hallway and the reception room that the camera covers and clearly see that a trembling image appears. An unknown shadow steps in the darkness, first turns on the lights. A mask is on its face. It passes through the hallway and the reception room, takes a look into the bedroom, and finally goes toward the kitchen. After that, only the light of the kitchen being switched on and a vague movement from behind the frosted glass of the kitchen door are seen. No face is clear and no sign of anyone's being there. Time passes and the shadow leaves the kitchen and without turning off the lights of the house goes out from there. The doctor, with a hoarse voice, says, "Do you see? It's the same as I said. Someone was in my house." His friend, who wants to return calm to him, lays his hand on his shoulder and gently says, "Yes, but nothing is stolen and no damage is done to the house. What need is there to go to the police? The best thing is that you forget this matter. Next week is your wedding ceremony. Now, more than ever, you need calm. Try to focus and occupy your mind with the joy that awaits you next week." The doctor, after a sorrowful pause, lowers his head and softly says, "You are right. I must pass beyond this distress and worry." The two talk together for an hour, and the time passes from midnight. He rises, and after shaking hands with his friend, thanks him, and comes out of his house, and gets into his car, and sets off toward his own home. As soon as he reaches the house, he goes and takes a hot shower, and since fatigue weighs on his body, he goes to bed, and in the blink of an eye, falls into a deep sleep. At dawn of the next day, when he wakes, first he goes to the kitchen, his gaze falls on the food dishes that the night before were cooked and prepared. He pauses for a moment, but he does not want to open the pots. He somehow puts them all in the refrigerator, and with a little bread and cheese and bitter coffee, eats a modest breakfast. Then he puts his clothes and throws his coat over his shoulder and sets out for the hospital. Days come without pause and pass. The dark shadow of that night gradually fades in the noise of work and the clamor of life. At last, the date of the wedding and contract arrives. The bride, who for 2 whole years has been like a faithful companion beside the doctor, goes with her relatives to the beauty salon to adorn herself for the rite of union. The groom also, with family and friends, busies himself with the preparations of the ceremony. Near sunset, the amber sun sinks in the horizon, and the lights of the hall are lit, one after another. The guests take their seats, and a pleasant murmur fills the space. Amid that joy and gladness, the bride and groom, shoulder to shoulder, go to the wedding spread and sit, a spread that is to tie their future together. The guests in the hall settle on their chairs. The murmurs have subsided, and all gazes are fixed on the wedding spread. The bride and groom sit beside each other, and the formula that is to join them is on the verge of being recited. A pleasant silence, like the calm of a sleep, casts its shadow over the hall. At this moment, suddenly from the end of the hall, a scream tears that silence. The screams of frightened women and the shouts of agitated men are heard. Several people with trembling hands and pale faces run toward the guests near the wedding spread and cry aloud, "Help! Call the police! Call an ambulance!" A sudden uproar sweeps through the hall. The guests, who a moment before were immersed in joy, now rise and look toward the sounds. A disturbed crowd forms at the end of the hall. Several take mobile phones from their pockets, and others loudly call for help. And some, astonished and unmoving, are nailed in place. The eyes of the doctor and his bride, who are still seated by the spread, are fixed with worry toward that side. The sound of screams and cries grows moment by moment, and the joyful space of the hall turns into a field of chaos and anxiety. The crowd moves toward the end of the hall. A group of guests has gathered in one place, and a murmur mixed with fear and disbelief coils in the air. The bride's heartbeat pounds quickly, and she is anxious. The young doctor quickly rises and goes toward the point from which the uproar has risen. At the end of the hall and in the midst of the crowd, the body of a woman has fallen on the ground. Her lips are blue, her eyes half open, and the thread of her life is as thin as a hair between death and life. Her hands are on her chest and tremble, and her breaths, broken and short, like the flame of a candle on the verge of extinction, rise from her chest. Those around still cry out in fear, "Help! Someone give her artificial respiration." It seems she cannot breathe. "Have you called an ambulance?" Quickly, the poor woman is slipping away. At that moment, the young doctor breaks the circle of the crowd and reaches the side of the patient and sits on the ground at her head and takes the woman's pulse. He does not have a good feeling, and after taking the woman's pulse, lowers her eyelids and stares into her eyes, and suddenly is transfixed on the spot. The woman's face is the beautiful face of his lost wife, who years ago, in a dreadful accident, while boating in the forest swamp, had fallen into the water and disappeared, and her body had never been found. He sees that his lost wife is now lying before him on the ground and experiencing a second death. The bride, with an anxious face, reaches the groom and with a pleading voice says, "My dear, come, we must continue our ceremony. The ambulance will come soon, and our friends will help and take her to the hospital." But the doctor, distraught and bewildered, pushes aside the bride's hand and himself lifts the woman from the ground and carries her to the door of the hall. And there his eye falls on a paper that the woman is clutching in her fist. He gently lays the woman on the ground and with great difficulty opens her closed fist and pulls out the crumpled paper. At that moment, the ambulance arrives and the rescue team stands at the woman's side. But it is already too late. The woman, before reaching the wedding ceremony, had drunk a deadly poison that her frail body could not bear. They place her on the stretcher and transfer her to the ambulance. The doctor, with a hoarse voice, turns to his bride and says, "Announce the end of the ceremony. I must go. I will contact you later." And before the bride can say anything, together with his old friend, he gets into the ambulance, and they set off to the hospital. The bride, who does not know what has happened, with her relatives bids farewell to the guests, and waits until news from the doctor and the hospital reaches them. The ambulance, siren wailing, is moving toward the hospital, and the doctor, sitting sadly by the rear door of the ambulance, with his trembling hand, opens the woman's crumpled paper and silently reads, "My beloved husband, greetings with a kiss. Congratulations on your wedding, my dear. It is my ill fortune that I do not have you beside me. It has been a week since I learned that you live in this city, but I did not succeed in seeing you. It seems that after that dreadful accident, you left your birthplace and settled in this land of exile. The old man who last week in that bazaar sold you the painting was the very one who saved me from death in the marsh. For a time I suffered from amnesia, and he accepted me as a member of his family. The painting that he gave you was an image that he painted of me with his own hands. And you, without knowing the story, recognized my face in that painting. And how strange that your eyes did not see that silver ring that was on my finger, the same ring with a lapis lazuli stone that you had given me on our wedding anniversary. I have long been searching for you, and what efforts I made. I went to all the hospitals and asked after you until at last I was able to obtain an address of your dwelling. And even one day, in disguise, I went to your house. Without thinking, I cleaned there. I cooked the food you loved for you. And finally, I kissed the pillows and the bed of your sleep, so that when you sleep upon them, you may feel my kisses. And today, I came to your wedding for our final farewell, to die once more before your eyes. I beg you, if you wish my soul to find peace, continue your wedding without letting a trace of sorrow settle upon your heart. I had already died before your gaze long ago, and I should have remained dead so that this bitter truth would never be revealed, that one day you will forget me. That woman, that bride sitting beside you now, did not take you from me, nor will I ever take you from her. Farewell, O springtime of my wintry moments. Farewell. The doctor, after reading the letter, becomes visibly shaken. He urgently asks his friend to stop the ambulance immediately. The vehicle pulls over onto the side of the dirt road. The doctor quickly steps out and rushes toward the wooded area beside the road, stumbling toward a tree where he collapses against its trunk. A bitter lump rises in his throat, accompanied by sudden nausea. He bends over and vomits. Moments later, he kneels down, sits on the ground, and then lies back. In a broken voice, he says to his friend, who had stepped out of the ambulance and followed him, "I don't feel well at all. Please, do exactly as I say without question. I want to entrust everything I have to you right here and now. I beg you, go immediately and buy me a plane ticket to the farthest corner of this world. And tell my bride that I am dead. Tell her that the dead do not interfere in the lives of the living. There's no need to tell her the story of my wife. Just wish her happiness from me. Now go and leave me alone." His friend, seeing his condition, realizes that advice or persuasion would be futile. Thus, with deep concern, he turns and leaves. The doctor, lying stretched out beneath the ancient cedar tree, closes his eyes toward the darkness of the night just arrived, as if he wishes to journey to the world of the dead, just like his lost love.